Welcome back to the afternoon sessions, and it's my great pleasure to introduce my friend Noel Whittaker. Noel has published 22 books on personal finance and investing, and they've sold over 2 million copies. He has a very popular website, noelwhittaker.com.au. Noel was involved at the coalface in financial planning for many years at Whittaker Macnaught, which he was involved in for 30 years. And Noel's articles are widely syndicated throughout Australia, and he's on radio and television, so he reaches millions of people every week. So Noel, great to see you. I checked the weather for southeast Queensland this morning, and it said sunny with 0 chance of rain. So how's it looking out there?
It's just perfect. But also we have half opened the borders to New South Wales today. Opened everyone except Greater Sydney. So we're still moving in the right direction, Graham.
Yeah. Well, when I saw that, and I read that people from Sydney couldn't come, so I'm not going to get a chance to see your beautiful place on the Brisbane River, but I understand you're at the Sunshine Coast at the moment.
Right now, yes. And properties going crazy at the Sunshine Beach. All the Southerners want to come and buy at Noosa, so
Right.
property's gone mad. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, look, the format I'd like to do today is we will talk about an article actually that we first published of yours in about 2013, but we republished it earlier this year to commemorate your 80th birthday. And so both times it went down really well. But what I'm actually going to start with is your hot off the press book, which very kindly, and look, it's already dog-eared, Noel, just to prove I've been reading
That's
it. And towards the back of this, talking about age, there's a almost the last page. It says, "Living your best life all the way to the end." And here you talk about David Attenborough is 94. Warren Buffett's 90, Jerry Harvey's 81, Kerry Stokes is 80, and then you say Clint Eastwood is 88. And when someone recently asked him, why do you keep working, or how do you keep working, he says, "I don't let the old man in." So I immediately thought, how does Noel Whittaker not let the old man in?
Well, you just keep doing your job. I mean, I'm focused on what I like. I've just launched a brand new book, which is a unique book in the space. And you just keep doing what you're doing. Warren Buffett's not retiring. Charlie Munger's not retiring. You just keep doing it.
But the thing
Keep
that's also
learning and learning.
the thing that's also interesting about the book, Noel, is that this although it's called Retirement Made Simple, it's not just about investing. You talk about diet and lifestyle. Tell us a little bit more about how at 80 you're staying fit and eating well.
I think, first of all, Graham, what we need to say is that retirement is a massive topic. There's investing, and there's psychology, and there's biases, and there's estate planning, and there's Centrelink. So it's a massive thing, and it's full of uncertainties, like we don't know how long we'll live, what the health will be. There's all sorts of uncertainties. But I think our two greatest assets are our health and our relationships. And both of these can be improved. For example, if you're a volunteer, then you live 30% longer than someone who's not. It's about exercise and diet.
Yeah, and you also take diet pretty seriously. You try and work on this 14-10 theory.
Well, the 14-10 simply means that you eat between, say, 9 o'clock in the morning and 6 p.m., then you don't eat until about 9 next morning. It's very simple.
Yeah.
And I've lost 3 Ks doing it, so there you go.
Okay. I think the challenge as this, in investing in retirement is to try and see retirement not as some sort of, end-of-life experience, but you talk about it being a period of fulfillment. So I think you've dedicated a lot of your life to making sure that people have the money available in that particular time. The problem is I don't think people realize how long they're going to live.
Yes, but most people underestimate how long they'll live. And one of the biggest problems facing the Australian government is that many people spend less than they should because they're frightened of dying early. And then they die with much more money than they wanted to. And that's why there's all these new income products being produced now to try to give people some extra certainty as they get older.
Yeah, it's sort of ironic that people could be having better retirement, if you like, but they're so scared of running out of money and spending some of the principal that they're quite conservative in the later years. You've obviously seen that.
Oh yes, but there's these new products which were introduced last year where only 60% of the asset counts for age pension purposes. So what a person can do is get a double boost. They can increase their age pension or else go on the age pension and give themselves an income stream for life as well. So they're great new products and they're a work in progress and they're happening right now.
Right. And I think the other section I was interested in your book here, Noel, if anyone gets it, page 184, and I will mention that at the end of this discussion, we're going to run a competition to give away 20 of Noel's books. I'll explain how to do that later. But if you miss out, go to noelwhittaker.com.au. There's a couple of special deals on there. But look, obviously superannuation is sort of fundamental to our retirement system. But you do point out here, interesting to see the calculations, that a couple in retirement can earn $60,000 and pay no income tax. So an important part of financial planning is to get people to realize whether their money should be in or out of super.
Yes, and it's a difficult choice. I mean, if you're very savvy and you've got, say, $800,000 of financial assets and you're smart, you don't need to be in super, which means you don't pay fees and you don't face the death tax. But if you're just a simple person or a couple and all your money's been run by a major superannuation fund, you're much better off to let the super fund make all the decisions for you and just simply pay you a monthly income. I remember when my father retired, he got £1,000 bonus and put that in the bank. And my mum said to him, "But Bert, you keep spending it." He said, "We need it." And she said, "We never needed it when it wasn't in the bank. Because once you take out a lump sum, you will start to nibble at it."
Yeah. So interesting
But
point.
I think the basic thing...
Yeah, go ahead.
Go on.
No, go for it.
I think the main thing about the retirement process is the better you plan, the better it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, what you don't want is a person aged 65 who suddenly retires with no plans of what they'll do. And secondly, all they've ever had is a bank account.
Yeah.
Because the best assets come from shares, market-linked funds. But if you're not used to shares, you'll be terrified when the market has a normal fall. I mean, yesterday was a big fall. It's a big bounce today. But you must get used to volatility, because volatility is the price you pay for getting the returns that you'll need.
So one of the lessons there is the reason to start early is that you get used to that sort of changes in the market just being, as you say, the cost of participating.
Yes, in the book I tell the story of the lily in the pond. Let's say there's a lily in a pond, and it starts as a tiny speck and doubles every day and fills the pond in 10 days. How long to go from quarter full to full? The answer is 2 days, because it goes from quarter full to half on the 9th and half to full on the 10th. Now, if that 10 days was your investing horizon and you're forced to harvest on the 8th day because you didn't start early enough, you've lost 3/4 of what you could have had.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing about the portfolio stuff, the biggest returns come at the end, because every time your money doubles, there's more growth in the last double than all the previous doubles combined.
Yeah, I think I've seen it.
That's why starting early is so important.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think I've seen a statistic that something like 95% of Warren Buffett's wealth has been accumulated after he turned 60. And, you know, so...
Probably 90.
Yeah. Well,
But there's also the thing called the 10-30-60 theory, that of your superannuation when you die, 10% comes from contributions and 30% from growth on those contributions and 60% from earnings after retirement. You know, as the pot gets bigger, it grows faster and faster.
yeah. Yeah, but it leads to an interesting point that one of the theories of retirement savings that is often put forward is that you invest in bonds, the percentage of your portfolio in bonds according to your age. So they say if you're 60 years old, 60% in bonds. Now, if that was the case with you, Noel, you would have 80% of your portfolio in bonds. I mean, the government bond rate is 0.8% at the moment. I'm guessing your portfolio doesn't look like that. So how do you feel about that theory? And particularly life cycle funds where people are encouraged to be more conservative as they get older. What do you think about that?
Well, I guess the older you get, the less the rate of return matters. But, you know, interest rates are at historic lows. As we all know, at some stage, rates must rise again. The moment rates rise, bondholders will get a bath. And I'd be terrified to be in bonds.
Okay, so at the particular conditions at the moment, that invest according to your age thing, you're not very keen on that.
I don't like it at all. But having said that, if a guy's 85 or 90 with a life expectancy of 5 or 6 years, the rate doesn't matter. I think at that age, the most important thing is to sleep at night.
Another part
If
of
you're
your
60, it's massively important. So.
yeah, another part of your book you mentioned just when you mentioned the life expectancy reminded me of this. There's a website you can go on which is called My Longevity, where you can actually estimate according to your age how likely you are to live. And you recently did this test, Noel, and the results for you are to 95. So you know you've got a long time for your investments to continue to grow.
Yes, I do. But also, it's not just age. That website's based on SHAPE. And S is your situation. People in a good situation live longer. H is health. A is attitude. P is parents. And E is eating habits. Now, those 5 major factors you have control over 4. You can change where you live. You can change your attitude. You can change your health. And you can certainly change your eating habits.
Well,
So we have a fair degree of
yeah.
control on all those things, yes.
Yeah, which might explain why you sent me a book last year about how to live to be 100. All these tips on my health. In fact, I did that test, and my result was 92. So there must be something about what you're doing for health which makes you live longer.
But also, as you get older, your life expectancy also goes up.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And also, it's a fallacy that old age equals frail. I mean, most healthy centenarians only have 2 or 3 months of ill health in the last 10 years of their life. So all these new things out are about letting you live longer. So it's not so much living longer, it's a matter of living your lifespan more healthy for most of it. That's what we all want, isn't it, really?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think another point that's made in the book, Noel, which I think a lot of people miss, is you stress that superannuation is not an asset class, it's an investment vehicle. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, you see, one of the main troubles that face investors is the media. If the market falls, 50 billion off super. If the market rises in the back page, it'll be up a few points. And people then associate the word superannuation with volatility. But once you tell people it's only a box to let you hold assets in a low tax area, that they sort of change their mind about it.
Yeah.
But there's also other traps out there. I mean, for example, it's common now as people get older that one of their partners dies, or their partner dies, then they meet someone whose partner's also died and they reform. Now, if one of those goes into a nursing home and pays a refundable accommodation bond, and the partner at home pays that, they may not know that that automatically goes to the estate of the nursing home person on death. You know, it's a real trap, and the world is full of traps like that.
Yeah, and aged care is particularly complicated. I know that you've written a book on this with Rachel Lane, but that's really an area that needs expert advice, isn't it?
I think it's the most complex of all, Graham. It's so complicated.
Yeah.
And anyone aged care, I say, please get expert advice.
Yeah.
It's just so difficult.
So a reminder to people to start sending in your questions. We've got a few questions coming in, but before we turn to those...
That's great.
Yeah,
great.
Yeah, there's some interesting ones here. But what I will do, first of all, is come back to this 20 Commandments of Wealth.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
And we'll just bring that up on everyone's screen. Not that people will have a chance to read all of this, but we'll just quickly...
It's on my website anyway.
Yeah.
It's on my website.
It's on First Links as well, Noel. So, you know,
oh, that's great.
We'll have a competition.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good for you.
So we won't go through all of these, but we'll pick out a few of them. The first one is, ignore the prophets of doom, and you're a natural-born optimist, so we'll go past that one. Talk about compounding and the importance of the rate of return in how long your money will last.
Well, the rate of return is the major factor in how much you'll have in your superannuation when you retire, and how long your money will last, and how much you need to invest to build your superannuation. Even the 1% shortfall can make a massive difference. And that's why fees are important. It's why you don't need unnecessary insurance, but also strategies. I mean, I often get the email, I'm 55, I want to retire in 10 years, I'm paying off my home mortgage. Should I focus on my mortgage or superannuation? Well, salary sacrifice to super is a no-brainer. I mean, your superannuation fund ought to be doing 7 or 8%. Your home loan should be 2 or 2.5. So why would you not focus on the higher return with pre-tax dollars?
Yeah.
There's big money in that strategy alone. Yeah.
Yeah. And going through this list, point 4, judging an investment on its merits. I must say, in the past, I've gone into some transactions for the tax benefits, and it hasn't worked out that well.
Haven't we all? But how about the one above it?
Yeah.
Which is a major one. Number 3.
Yeah.
Time and time I get the email. I put the name on the title deed of my daughter's house so they could buy a house. Now I've got to pay capital gains tax when they want to have it transferred to them. That's a major one. See, you always take advice before the deed is done, always.
And also in that example, you have to pay stamp duty as well. And, stamp duty...
Of course you do.
Stamp duty is an enormous imposition. You've got all the transaction costs. So getting the right name on the transaction is absolutely important. And I've also found in my own situation that sometimes an asset that's in my SMSF would have been better in my own name or vice versa. So you have to think, what vehicle are you investing in?
Sure, but also then they go for the age pension and they can't get it because they've got $500,000 tied up in daughter's house.
Yeah.
And then when they do make the transfer, you've got the double whammy of capital gains tax, and then you've got to wait for 5 years for settling purposes.
Yeah.
It's a big one, that one. It's huge.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Okay, number 5, anyone rings you up for an offer of an investment, hang up as quickly as you can. I think we've all experienced that one.
If it's any good, why would you be selling it? That's the point.
Yeah, okay. So number 7, involve your partner if you have one in financial decisions. This is really an interesting one, particularly with the complexity of, say, an SMSF. And we do know that often SMSFs have a dominant partner, often the male, but won't overgeneralize that point.
Sure.
So there's a big case to bring everyone into the conversations.
Absolutely, and it could be difficult. I mean, it's sort of hard to explain all the things you're doing on a daily basis to your partner, but it's important. It's critically important, and your kids too, if you can. I mean, I've got a friend who's an estate lawyer, and he says one of the best ways to avoid fights over estate is transparency. The more the family know about the financial situation, the less likely to have fights about it.
Yeah, yep. Okay, so going down to number 8, which we've highlighted here, this is a really difficult one for people. I think a lot of people who might have, say, $1 million and the market falls 50%. Now, the market falls 50% at least once every 20 years. So anyone with an investment horizon that, even if they're 60, that's going to be an experience that they have. But that's probably they need to steel themselves for not selling in that sort of market condition. But no doubt with the clients that you've had over the years, you've seen a lot of this selling at the worst time.
Well, people think that they can forecast the market and they can't. I mean, there is no doubt that nobody knows the top or bottom of the market, and people get spooked. You've just got to keep 3 or 4 years planned expenditure in cash, because you're never forced to dump good assets when the market's having one of its normal bad days.
Yeah. Yeah. And as someone who's just updated my will, going on to number 9, where I thought I'd be in and out in 15 minutes, where I said to my wife, look, this is going to be easy. We've both only been married once. We've got 2 children. There's no complications. And 4 visits to the lawyer later, we finally finished with our will. But it's definitely worth putting the time into getting it right.
Absolutely. It's better off to spend the money now than spend a big sum later.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
So we can just go to the next 10. Thank you. That'd be great on this. Okay. Okay, so I'll just go very quickly because I do want to leave time for questions. And so just stop me, Noel, if there's any you particularly want to talk about. But going down to 17, don't follow the herd and back last year's winner. That's a recipe for disaster. Why do you like this one?
Well, it's just so human nature. Property's booming, I'll buy property. Afterpay's booming, I'll buy Afterpay. It's well proven that last year's performer is seldom this year's best performer. And that's why it's important to be diversified and stay on track.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just continue down here. So what have we got? Finally, keep in mind that your potential worst enemies can be the media, who focus on the negative, and well-meaning acquaintances who may give you information that might be half right. I must say, the tips in the corridor very rarely work out well.
Never work out. But there's always someone that's got a half-truth. There's a rumour the government's doing this and that. There's always a rumour, and it's usually wrong anyway.
Yeah. So, Noel,
it's like the conspiracy theories. Yes.
Yeah. I've got a question here on what you consider from your long time of investing. If you had to draw out 1 or 2 major lessons for people, what would they be?
I think the first thing is to work out which assets best to hold it, whether it be super, your own name, joint names, or a family trust. And certainly spread your assets. Then pick good stuff and stay in there. Don't try to chop and change.
Okay, looking good. Okay, I've got all of these questions.
And that's good.
Okay. So look, Noel, we're in particularly volatile times at the moment, and the safety of term deposits will get you, 1% if you're lucky. Do you have any particular advice for investing in volatile times and knowing what the next year is probably going to be difficult conditions?
Well, don't forget, if we get a vaccine, the market could double. This is the whole point. And I like an index fund for most people, because an index fund requires no decisions to make. And if you go in on a monthly basis, you can't go wrong. The thing about the index, it can't go broke. If you go into a bad bond or a bad security such as a mortgage trust. If it goes bad, you lose everything. In an index fund, the worst that can happen is it will fall and come back. And don't forget, the biggest rises always come after the biggest fall. And the biggest falls, most people get out.
Yeah.
A lot of people got out when the market fell in March. And it bounced again. So don't jump in and out of the market. And an index fund requires no investment decisions whatsoever, and they've got very low fees. I think the index funds charge about 0.08% or something. You know,
Okay, Noel.
it's all in the book, Graham.
Yeah,
It's all in the book.
I was reading it last night. It's it's definitely a good read. So,
Yeah.
Noel, we're getting like dozens of questions coming in. So I'm just going to
That's great.
fire.
I love questions.
Yeah, I'm just going to fire these at you. So you mentioned that you don't invest in bonds, but you have mentioned shares. Can you tell us more about your portfolio and what other things you might invest in?
Well, I've got a good home on the Brisbane River, which is good, right? I'm in property syndicates. I don't like residential real estate, and I'm no good at non-res, but I'm in some good property syndicates, and they're great. And that's my major investments. Yeah. So shares, own home, and property syndicates.
You've mentioned to me in the past that your own experience with investment property was not the most wonderful experience, but very often, if you think the way Australians invest, they work, they try and get some money, they buy the family home, but very often, once they accumulate some wealth and start to invest, the first investment is an investment property. But you're not flattering of that option, are you?
Well, I bought a unit down the Gold Coast in 1990 for $500,000. It would now be worth 800,000. I paid 500,000. It would now be worth about 800,000. The same money in an index fund would now be worth $9.6 million. It's amazing, isn't
it? And you've paid a few bills along the way, no doubt.
Oh yeah, but I mean the whole thing. If you're buying property, the key is to add value. You can't add value to an apartment. There's always better ones being built.
Yeah. So, Noel, where would you recommend people go for retirement advice? Other than your book?
You need a good advisor. well, you start with my book, and my book tells you how to find a good advisor, and there's heaps of them. But I think probably the best place is recommendations from friends who are happy, and watch they don't charge too much in fees. And I had a mate who was complaining. He had a $4 million share portfolio. He was charging a 1% flat fee. He was paying $40,000 a year on a $4 million portfolio. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It shouldn't happen.
You can do better than that. So, Noel, there are particular circumstances with COVID at the moment, and obviously, regardless of who is elected as the president on Tuesday, the United States has to somehow unite itself. The question here is, how do you feel about the future? Do you think 2020 is better than 1990? And how do you feel about 2050? As maybe we both won't be around at that stage, but how do you feel about the future?
Well, there was a great thing by Lord Macaulay, and I think he said this in 1790. How can we be pessimistic about the future when, if we look back, every decade's been better than the last one? I'm an optimist, but I think the most important thing is if you control the things you can control, you don't need to worry about what you can't. I can't. I've got no control over America, So what you've got to do is take charge of what you can control, your investments, your own health, your estate planning, and don't try to worry about what may or may not happen. Because as Don Stammer says, there's always factor X. You know Don Stammer, Graham, of course?
Yeah.
And every year Don's published his factor X, and factor X is something we could not have predicted.
Yeah.
And I think this year it's going to be COVID. I think. that we can sort of say that was round a bit late last year, yeah.
How have you been during COVID, Noel? Obviously, you normally travel an enormous amount. How's it affected you personally?
Well, the Amex cards is in credit balance now because of all the refunded trips.
Right.
So I was having a cruise around Japan in April and a cruise around Sicily in September, and they haven't happened. And we were enjoying it. You know, enjoying it, and it gave me time to write the book.
Well, in case I missed them, there's a couple of flattering comments. As a 75-year-old myself, I want to congratulate you, Noel. You're an inspiration, which is great.
Thank you.
Someone here suggests you should be knighted. You've got an Order of Australia for services to.
I've got an Order of Australia.
You got an Order of Australia,
yes.
so you might have to wait for the knighthood.
That won't happen. Yeah.
So, Noel, this is from a younger person. Would you still recommend that a person should aim to get their family home as the first sort of big investment that they get?
Yes, I think it's a good foundation, but you don't need to pay it off. To me, the whole name of the game is like a Monopoly game. You need to have as many assets under control as possible. Now, you could have a mortgage now at 2.5% and rates aren't going up. Once you're comfortable with the mortgage, then you start to diversify into shares, in my view.
Yeah.
That's easy.
I
And
think
that then gives you control over the shares. Say, go on.
I was just going to say that I think the great thing about owning your own house in retirement is it gives you more control over your own destiny. The problem we have in Australia is a lot of residential property is on short leases. We've got friends who seem to have to change where they live every year. They've got young children, and the upheaval to your life, you don't want that throughout your entire life. So obviously when you're 20 or 30, that's an inevitability. But at some stage, to get your own house for the period when you're going into retirement adds a lot to your financial security.
Look, there is nothing worse than going into retirement with no house and being single, because you can't exist on the single pension and pay rent. I think one of the major things I think we'll find in the retirement incomes report, if and when it comes, is that they're the worst off. What we don't want is someone in retirement with no house.
Yeah.
As a single.
So getting a few questions, Noel, about how people should talk to their children. You've got 3 children and I think 13 grandchildren, last count?
12 grandkids and another one in the pipeline, I'm told.
Right.
Yes.
So at what stage did you start to bring them into the conversations, either about where they sit in the family finances or to give them lessons on investing?
Well, I certainly made sure that they all had jobs when they were teenagers. And my eldest son used to pack cassettes and books for me. My daughter worked for me. My second son worked in a bread shop. Also, as we say, the apple never falls far from the tree. I mean, my wife and I have always believed in working hard and integrity. And that's been passed on to the kids, which is great. It's a famous saying that your kids won't always do what you say, but they'll certainly do what you do. Yeah.
Have you brought them into those conversations where you've said, this is how much assets we have, and you should know where you stand if we were to disappear quickly?
Yes, we've been totally transparent. That's all written down, and I think it's important too that you have a box or a folder or something where who's your bank contact, your superannuation contact, who's your stockbroker. So all these people are there, and with our kids we'll be totally transparent. Absolutely.
Noel, you mentioned earlier about death tax, and we've got a question
Death
here
tax,
about
yes.
and I know the one you mean, that it's the superannuation that is paid to a non-dependent child. But do you want to a lot of people think there are no inheritance taxes, no death taxes in Australia. Can you just explain what that one is and possible mitigation actions to avoid paying it?
Well, it's interesting that tomorrow's the election in Queensland, and Clive Palmer's been running full-page ads, Labor's death tax. Now, it's complete nonsense. But if you have money in super, it'll be mostly taxable probably and part non-taxable. On death, the taxable component, if left to a non-dependent, and when you die where you would think your kids wouldn't be dependents, suffers a tax of 17%. Now, if it's left to a partner, it's not a problem. But it's the partner has the problem. You know, but also too, if you've got a big superannuation balance, the most your partner can have is the $1.6 million. Then they're faced with investing the excess as well. And the death tax is easy got round. You simply have an enduring power of attorney with instructions to withdraw all your superannuation tax-free when you think you're getting near death. I mean, most people just don't drop dead.
Yeah. So you have all your arrangements in place so that hopefully just before you die, you take your money out of superannuation.
Yes, but also, I mean, again, all superannuation does is let you have money in a low tax or tax-free area. Now, if you're 2 or 3 years away from death anyway, the tax benefits are not too much. I mean, you could take it out yourself a couple of years before death. It's not going to matter very much. What you don't want to do is die with a large sum of taxable superannuation and no dependents. And it happens.
So Noel obviously spent a long time in the financial advice industry, and we've seen a lot of changes in that industry in recent years.
Yeah.
We've had a listener here ask about how you should be paying your financial advisor. Should they charge you a percentage of the size of your portfolio, or should they be working on an hourly rate? And has the industry made enough of the transition from one to the other?
Well, I think it's horses for courses, but I prefer that they charge like accountants, that they charge an hourly rate. I just think that's fair. But again, it depends on the arrangement and how much it is. But that's the way I would see it.
Yeah. Okay, and
or they may charge a retainer or something.
Yeah.
You know, but we sold the business in 2007, so I've been 13 years out of the industry. So
right.
It's a long time.
Yeah. Okay. No, fair enough. That's worth acknowledging. And another question here about negative gearing. Do you feel that that's part of the value of a real estate investment?
Well, you can negative gear shares as well, except with a yield of 4% and a rate of 2.5, you probably can't negative gear. But all negative gearing does is let you control more assets. And when Labor was running their anti-negative gearing program, I said, well, think about a couple that go out and they buy an investment property. For the first 5 years, we as taxpayers put in $5,000 a year for them. And after 5 years, it becomes, neutral geared. The other couple of years is positively geared. And then in 20 or 30 years' time, they sell it, say $800,000. They pay a big swag of capital gains tax, maybe $200,000 or $300,000, and they can't get the pension. So the investment of $25,000 by we as the taxpayers, when they bought the property, would pay us back $800,000 or $900,000 down the track. So I think negative gearing is a fantastic strategy for everybody.
Yeah. Okay, Noel, I mustn't forget to do your book giveaway. So I mentioned Noel's age earlier when I also mentioned other luminaries like Clint Eastwood. Well, I wanted to emphasize to people that investing in retirement, it can be done until you're 100. You don't have to take conservative position until you're 80. So we have 20 copies of Noel's book to give away. You just have to answer this question: what's Noel's age? So don't confuse him with Warren Buffett or Clint Eastwood. Noel, we want. Send in your response to events.au@morningstar.com, and the first 20 correct replies will win, and we'll come back to you for your details. So just quickly, Noel, thanks for sending through your book. I really enjoyed it. Personally, I have to say my highlight was on page 421, where you say the best two resources for the over 50s are the Noel Whittaker newsletter, so I'll concede that you would put that one first. And secondly is First Link.
Of course.
Yeah. And
That's great.
thanks for the plug.
They're both free.
And they're both free. You've been a great supporter
Both
of the
free.
business over the years. Thanks very much for your time this afternoon.
Thanks, Graham.
Been fantastic. Thanks, Noel. And hopefully I can come to Queensland sometime in the next 6 months.
Hope so for sure.
Okay. Bye.
Any advice in this video is general advice prepared by Morningstar without reference to your financial objectives, situation, or needs. You should consider the advice in light of these matters and any relevant product disclosure statement before making any decision to invest.